Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned into Just the Facts. I have in the studio today at-large candidate Harry Welty. Welcome, Harry. Nice to have you in here.
Marcy.
Good to have you in here again. He's running for the 709 School District. Harry, you've got a bit of a history with this school district. You've been on the board, and then you were off for a few years, and now you've had one term, and you're going for another. Would you like to give us a little overview of why?
I'm probably the proverbial bad penny. I just keep coming back. I got elected to the school board, just for a little history, after trying to get elected 3 times, 89, 1989, 1991, 1993. And I've always described my election in 1995 as one where the voters just got tired and said, heck, let him have the office. And I served for 2 terms, 8 years. And at that time, I was doing my very best to make sure we had as much money in programming and in classroom as possible. And I began advocating closing one of the high schools down, and that wasn't terribly popular at the time. And I kind of came to the conclusion after 8 years that I'd seen too many school board members, just kind of go through the motions in their 3rd year. And I didn't want to do that, and I also didn't think that we'd ever go to 2 high schools to save $1.2 million, which is what the savings were projected to be. And then within a few years, we got a new superintendent of schools who got the school board and the community very excited about having 2 high schools, but instead of saving $1.2 million, he was going to spend what ultimately turned out to be $500 million, which wasn't my idea. And as a consequence, we are suffering. And basically, to finance that, and I don't think any of the school board members had a clue what was going on. They just thought that building new schools for the 21st century was going to be great for kids. Essentially what we've done, as I've come to figure it all out, is cannibalize $11 million out, just take it out of the classroom, and we're paying off these brand new schools. So we've sacrificed $10 million, $11 million that could be going into educating kids, but they are housed in buildings that we're going to have a hard time maintaining as the years go on.
You mean our shiny new schools are not going to be shiny new schools after a little while? Gary Glass was on the school board when all of this red plan was going down.
Yes.
And Gary Glass was the only voice that understood what was going to happen. And he was the crying in the wolf voice that we heard, and that's when I came on board and started monitoring the 709 school district. And what Harry is saying is true.
Wrong metaphor, though. He wasn't crying wolf. He was telling it like it is. He was crying in the wilderness because
crying in the wilderness as a wolf, whatever. But he definitely saw, because he could do the financial figures and see what was going on, and other people. And I've seen this on other boards too, where people just go along to get along, and they think things are great because somebody tells them it is, but they don't do their homework. You do your homework. I've seen you do your homework.
I have done my homework, and I have to tell you that 4 years ago, when I was running in the 2013 election, even though I had watched the catastrophe that is the red plan unfold, schools that weren't prepared, throwing new kids in, throwing more kids in classrooms, teachers wholly unprepared for what was about to happen as we moved kids around willy-nilly, whole school populations to new schools. I hadn't quite figured out what I just told you, that this was basically going to be taking $10 million a year for the entire length of the red plan out of our budget. And while Gary Glass, Art Johnston, Lauren Martell, and me, all of us sensed what was going on. It's only been in comparing the budget that existed 2 years into my first term in 1997 with the budget of this year that I realized what we've essentially done is we've decided not to use any of our local property taxes for the classroom. In 1997, our property taxes, the 22, 23, 24% of the school district budget that is raised locally was split like this. I think it was $9 million went into paying off previous bonded indebtedness from school building projects, and 14.5 million went into the classroom. Today, we're paying $8 million more to the school district, but now 28.5 million, not 9 million, 28.5 million is going off to pay the red plan debt, and that leaves $2.5 million. We used to have $14 million. We basically have sacrificed $11.5 million that used to go in the classroom, that could pay teachers, could pay for the curriculum department, and that we no longer have. And we've had school board members complain that, well, it's all special education or it's the state that's not taking care of things. No. Our school board that was so happy to have the red plan did not have the courage to raise the taxes that it cost. They should have raised taxes another $10 million a year to pay for the red plan. Instead, they took it out of the classrooms. And that's why we are where we are. And that's going to lead to the fight that you and I are about to have about whether we need to have taxes and take care of these buildings since we've put ourselves in this precarious situation.
Well, okay, let's have this little fight. I, as a taxpayer, property owner of a business, had a 339% increase in 1 year in my school taxes only. That didn't include the state and the township that it was in, etc. It was only for the red plan, Harry. Now, 339% increase in 1 year, that's obnoxious. I wish I could think of even a better word for it. It's unbelievable. We're 1 year into our new business and we're getting hit with a 339% increase for shiny new schools where the promises were lower class sizes, equity between the east side and the west side of the city, shiny brand new buildings. One building, $58 million, the new middle school, or 52 million, someplace in there. I don't know the exact figure anymore. Sort of lost that. But I mean, there was such waste in this whole thing. And then you just go to the taxpayers and say, you know what? These past people made all these mistakes, and now we're going to have to raise your taxes because we've got no money going into the classroom. That's not my fault. You, the voters out there, are the ones that made the choices for some of the people that are on that board right now. And you need to really think about making better choices this year. Hopefully our program will help you choose candidates who are really interested in trying to get this problem straightened out, because it is a problem. So if you have shiny new schools and your kids are going to every other school district because the education isn't there, the teachers are strapped, they don't have the support teams they used to have. When I first came into this, they used to have some help in the classrooms. They virtually got none, but they got more students. I mean, I think we've got a misguided administration, and we've got misguided people on the school board right now that are making very poor decisions that are affecting everybody. The students are being affected, the teachers are being affected, the taxpayers are being affected. What are some of the solutions by saying, well, taxpayers, we need more money. We've misspent your money, now we need some more of your money? You think the taxpayers are going to approve of that?
I'm not everybody's cup of tea, as you well know.
Yes.
And I'm not always your cup of tea, Marcia.
That's right.
Especially on the issue of taxes. And I will tell you why the people who... we have an election here where we've got two groups of people. We have the group of people who want to sweep the past away. The red plan is over and done with. Well, not as long as it's taken $10 million a year out of the classroom, it's not.
No.
That's my point of view. And they want to have positivity. They want to talk about all the wonderful things that happen in our schools, and that's true. I mean, you cannot have 9,000 kids, or actually 8,500 kids, and not have wonderful stories to tell about what's going on, even if they are suddenly in classes of 33, 34, 35, or 36 kids, 40 kids maybe, unlike was the case a long time ago. Because some of those kids come from families that can take care of them, and those kids do very well, even under difficult circumstances. So there are people who basically think every time I moan and groan about the difficulties that we face, I'm souring people on the school district. And there may be truth to that, because I have talked about the problems that we would have, and I pretty well anticipated them, and now as a school board member I have to deal with them. And I don't want to discourage people, but what I will not do is talk through my hat. I'd rather be honest about it. These schools are a huge investment that we have undertaken without the support of voters, to the tune of $480 million. And, I remember when a big bond referendum was offered in 1989, that one for $50 million, a lot of people complained that we hadn't taken care of the schools. Well, we are going to rapidly be in a situation where we have this $500 million investment, and unless we have the resources, they're going to start falling apart because we just simply aren't caulking things and making sure the mortar stays in and making sure the roof tiles are tight, and we're not having buckets like was the case when my children were little, in the hallways to catch leaking water. And I'm sorry, we can't go to Bill Gates and ask him to take care of the school district. This is our responsibility. And the worst thing for the city of Duluth would be to be so angry about what previous school boards did in their cluelessness that we allowed this huge investment to degrade, so that we had a bunch of derelict buildings that looked like they were just built for an Olympic complex in a country that's now in default. I'm sorry to talk so long, but
well, that's a very good analogy there, but it's true. Well, okay, so you raise the taxes again. Where's it going to go?
Well, we have a Hobson's choice here, and this is what the poor administration and the other school board members who want to be positive have to face. We do have some authority to levy the taxes. Now, all that, a big portion of the money that we decided to take away from the classroom are in certificates of participation, COPs, they're called. They're not traditional bonds. I mean, it's borrowing, but the legislature and the state law apparently allows us to just say, oh, we made a mistake. We're going to start levying additional taxes, which was what we should have done at the very beginning. Instead of borrow this money, take it out of the classroom. We can do that. We don't have to ask the voters to do that. But we do also ask the voters for extra operational levies, and we have to go to them for that. And right now I think we've got about $1.8 million annually, and we're going to have to come back to the voters and ask them if, won't they pretty please authorize us to levy those taxes. So here's the Hobson's choice. Okay, so we go ahead and we decide we've got to stop borrowing money from the classroom. We're going to raise those taxes. And we didn't ask for the voters' help on the red plan. If we decide suddenly to take $3.4 million or something like that and raise those taxes, what happens when we go back to the public and we say, oh, now that we've raised another $3 million in taxes that we have every right to raise under state law, would you be willing to reauthorize the operational levy that you gave us a couple of years ago? Well, we might have some resistance, and I can understand why. So do we do this? Do we ask people to raise those rates, raise those operational levies, have them do it when they vote yes, and then go ahead and raise the rest of those taxes after they've approved the operational levy. I think that's sneaky. I understand why they might want to do it, because a lot of people are afraid that people are mad at them.
They should be, because people are.
And they should be mad. I want to make the case that we made this huge investment, that even though we were denied the right to vote in it, it makes sense if we have an administration and a school board we can trust for the next 4, 5, 6 years to make that investment, because this community does not want to have inferior schools and have our children leaving to go to other school districts because they've given up on ours.
And that is exactly what is happening. They are going to different school districts, and so we're losing about $10,000 per student.
30% of our kids leave to go to charters or open enroll into Hermantown or Renshaw or Proctor or Hermantown. I guess I said that already. But we're losing them.
Yes, unfortunately we are. And that's a chunk of money. If 30% are leaving, what's a ballpark figure of what we've lost since the Red Plan's implementation? That's thousands, millions of dollars worth of money that could be in the classroom, and also, fixing these wonderful schools that we got ourselves roped into.
School finance is a little bit like chess. The superintendent will say, and he's completely right, if we have a child that transfers out to some other school district, we don't have to pay to educate them. Now, we have to send the money they were entitled to another school district, but we don't have to hire any teachers to pay them. Well, that's true to a point.
Right.
But what happens if we have no kids in our $500 million schools? Well, we still have to pay the bondholders and the lenders who gave us all the money.
And then all those students who no longer can take classes because there aren't enough other students who have left the district are opting for those classes. Well, then we don't have to pay a teacher. And those kids that want those classes, there's too few of them, because too many have gone to another district. So that's a very lame way of saying, well, we don't have to educate them then. My statement on that, I won't ask you to defend or deny it, but I would say we have an incompetent superintendent, and unfortunately, people like your opponent and others who have been on the board already have allowed that person to be the superintendent of the schools, and to me, he's the major part of the problem, because he's not thinking very well, and he's not really interested in anything more than the salary he's getting. That's my opinion. You do not need to agree or disagree with that. However, that's what I've seen, and that's the way I feel about it. So the loss of students is a tremendous problem, especially when we were told, well, we build them and they'll come. Well, we built them and they're not coming, they're going. And that is just a tragic loss for this community.
I don't know that I want to make the superintendent of schools the issue for this campaign.
No.
I want the public to understand that they've got very tough financial decisions to make. And I want, the best of my ability, to make sure that the public has that decision, that they know what's coming up and we don't try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, and that we go with our eyes wide open into whatever decisions we make, whether we're going to properly take care of the district or turn our back on it. I will say this, Marcia. My first 2 years on the school board were terrible years. And I've told the superintendent this in my evaluations of him. I was censured. Art Johnston was censured. We spent $200,000 roughly in legal costs trying to remove Art Johnston, whose chief crime is he keeps asking questions, and he's annoyed that when he makes requests for public data, he's denied them.
He's denied.
And this is as a school board member. And I have to say, while he appears ornery and crotchety, the things that happened to him in those 2 years that I first served on the school board would make anybody crotchety, especially when they're simply doing their public service of asking questions that make people mad and embarrass people. He was accused of racism. He was said to be acting in such a way as a conflict of interest. He was violating the conflict of interest. Well, recent news stories have indicated that all sorts of people can be guilty of conflict of interest. Now, I won't go there right now.
Yeah.
He was accused of being, one of our fellow school members, Rosie Leffler-Kemp, said he was scary and dangerous. You know, I've seen Art with people where he's in tears, and he just helped one of our school board members rescue them from a near disaster out on the lake. He just did this on his own, no charge, just came out middle of the night to help them when their boat was out of power. And a lot of people that know him in places other than the school board think he's the sweetest fellow in the world. So
I thought he was a teddy bear the first few times I ever met him.
Yeah.
He didn't say a word, and he was extremely polite. Yeah, now we're getting off of your situation here, but yeah.
Well, whether Art is on the school board or not might make a big difference in how things are. I have to say that if I am reelected and I find myself in the kind of minority that ignored me for the first couple of years I was on the school board, I will be immensely frustrated. And what I've told people about Art is, you know, I've told many people, Art made me madder than anybody's ever made me. I understand that he is stiff-spined when he's got a point of view. But I've never doubted his integrity. I've never doubted his honor. And I've never doubted his steadfastness. And I read a perfect quote, and I wish I could remember where it was, but it talked about the kind of people that sometimes you need to make sure that the wrong is righted, that you go in the right direction. And sometimes those are people who are just hard to live with.
They get under your skin, don't they?
They get under your skin. And I'd love to have Art back there backing me up. And if losing Art means that I find myself in a minority like I was in the first couple of years, that will be distressing to me.
Well, it'll be distressing for more than you. I've heard another person say the same thing. And so nobody wants to be in that position. It's not easy to be the only voice or only two voices out of 7. It's not that easy. But
well,
I know that you've done a great job thus far. You've had a stick-to-itiveness and got yourself into a little bit of trouble because people don't particularly like your ways of doing things either, but I've seen you grow in your position, and I appreciate what you have done and tried to right some of the wrong. I don't agree with you on raising taxes all the time because it seems like every government is busy raising taxes, but they're not trying to find ways to economize and cut corners, except I know in this one particular situation, I know an employee that's on the low part of the totem pole, so to speak. I don't denigrate any race or anything. That's a terminology that's been used for years. To get a 25-cent raise when other raises are a whole lot more substantial than that, and then sit there and watch those meetings for 8¼ years and see the other wastes that are being done. I don't like my taxes raised because I don't think my money is being spent wisely. And that has been shown to me over and over and over again. So I want to know, are there some ways outside of the classroom that we could cut so that we don't have to constantly go to the taxpayers and say, well, we need more money because we just don't have enough. What on earth can we do? Can we sell some property perhaps that we were promised was part of the infamous Red Plan? I mean,
well,
what can we do? What can we do?
To the 2 points you've raised, we have a lot of hourly employees, and they are low on the totem pole. And some of us, Alana and I, advocated that we try to find some way to give them a little bit more, because really they do critical work. Watch the playgrounds, watch the cafeterias. They have a lot of contact with our kids, and they're paid very little.
Terrible.
And I suppose if you want to be if you want to be a social Darwinian, you can say. We pay what the market will bear. And there are people who need those jobs, although a lot of them do it because their children have been there and they like to be there, but they don't get paid much. So I understand that. As to the sales of properties, oh my gosh, the whole RED plan was based, at least in part, on selling properties to somebody.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly right.
We have squandered about $20 million. We could have sold about $20 million worth of buildings, and we wouldn't sell to a competitor. The best offer we're ever going to have for Central High School, $14 million, maybe it was 14.5. We could have sold to Many Rivers, which is hardly any competition for us at all. We could have sold a building to them and made maybe $700,000. Instead, they just simply went to Woodland Hills, a wonderful school that deals with kids who have been adjudicated. A lot of them are kids who are sent to Duluth. They actually sold their old Cobb school, which was a public school once, to Many Rivers.
Right.
So Many Rivers made that sale. That meant that we had an obligation to house the kids that we've been educating for Woodland Hills, and that meant that all of a sudden we couldn't sell Rock Ridge. We had to spend maybe $3.5 million to fix it up. So there was another $700,000 potential sale that turned into a $3.5 million cost. So this idea of protecting our school district against these predatory competition is killing us. I mean, what could you do with $14 million? Well, for 3 years, you wouldn't have to transfer that $3.4 million I talked about out of the classrooms. Maybe you'd be able to get some more teachers in there, enhance the programs, and maybe that would mean that you'd have fewer kids open enrolling out of the school district because their parents would see that we were doing our best to shore up stuff. But we passed up on that opportunity.
So it's what you know when you decide on how you're going to vote. Do you just read the Duluth News Tribune and watch the news media, controlled media?
Well, is this controlled or not? I mean, I can rampage here. You said Art Johnson knocked over a glass of water when he was here with you last. So I've been trying not to wave my hands around and act like an Italian.
Well, I don't want your papers to get wet, Harry. Now, controlled media. I mean, okay, this goes out on YouTube, and so anybody can pick up on it and listen to it. It's no cutting. Everything you say is going to be on the final cut. But anyway, do you make your decisions based on just one side of the issue, or do you go out there and find alternative media and get all the facts before you go to that voting booth and vote, which the primary election is coming up here very soon. What's the date again now?
Oh, it's the
September,
second Tuesday. Is that
is it
September
15th? Is that correct? I believe.
I'd have to pull my phone out and take a look at it.
But anyway, it's important because the primary, too often, people do not vote in the primary. And this is where you get to choose the candidates who are going to be in the general election in November. So I'm requesting my viewers out there to get informed and make proper choices, because who you choose for the final in November are the ones that are going to make the decisions to straighten out some of this mess that has been going on since the RED plan came to town about 10 years ago now, I believe it was.
Yes.
It's time for us to make some kinds of changes, and how do we do it? Do we just keep putting the same people who want everything to be kumbaya and let's sweep the red plan and its mess under the rug and forget about it and let it fester until eventually it explodes again in our faces a few years down the road. It's important for you, the viewers, to choose wisely. And so having candidates come in here and talk about their perspective is the purpose of this program. So now, Harry, you've explained a few of the issues that are most foremost in my mind. What are some of the things that have been going on since I quit taping all of the board meetings? Yes. I haven't really had time to pay attention. I've decided to move on in life and do a few other things that are got to be done in my own realm.
Well, when Alana Oswald joined the school board, that changed things immensely a year and a half ago, because suddenly Art and I had an ally, and we had been making a case that we wanted to have all the committee meetings for the school district televised and put on YouTube so that people who couldn't make those meetings would be able to watch them. Now, there are not a lot of people that do watch those, but you know, when you see that 47 or maybe 80 people have watched a meeting, we have probably quintupled the number of people who see these meetings, because there are not a lot of people who come and sit in for 2 or 3 hours when we sit down before the school board meeting and talk at the business and HR and education committee meetings.
Rarely was there anybody there, I can say from my own experience.
So that's one of the things that we did. You know, we want transparency. We want people to know what's going on, and that we were able to do once we had one more vote, and we were able to persuade some people on the other side that this was a good. In fact, it might have been a unanimous. Well, I think there was one person who voted against televising this, but I can't be. My memory's not perfect on that, but those are things we want people to be able to see what we're doing. I was going to mention. What was I going to mention? I have a lot of things stewing in my head right now, so I'm going to let you ask another question, and I'm going to try to stick to the task. What else was going on? You think you asked?
That's yes. Since I left, but I did think of one thing.
Yeah.
County board, townships, and I know that Rice Lake, which is now a city, and the city council have open agenda setting meetings.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen that happen for the 709 school district. Give me your thoughts on that.
Okay. You know, and they asked me about this in the News Tribune. So you may have you may look at the News Tribune with a jaundiced eye, but to me, I subscribe and I want to keep track of what goes on, and I want there to be a healthy news industry out there reporting what's going on. So what's happening with that? Those first 2 years that I think perhaps I could point to some of the leadership of our administration say, you know, apparently they could not persuade the rest of the school board to ease off on the attack on Art Johnston, which didn't maybe show us the kind of respect that the superintendent should have been offered, because he has suggested to me that he advised against the very things that were done. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm not going where I was going to go. Ask that question.
Why is it? I mean, okay. Other.
Oh, the agenda setting.
Yeah.
All right. So the city does have an agenda setting session. All the city councilors sit in on that. The first 2 years I was on the school board, Art and I had no control of what would go on the agenda. In the old days when I was in the school board, 20 years ago, 2 board members, all they had to do was just tell the school board chair, hey, we want to talk about this, and it would go on the agenda. You have to do it in a timely way before, let's say a week before the school board meeting. Well, under Dixon, they changed that rule, and until Alana joined us, we were helpless. There was no way we could get things to talk about.
That's correct. I recall that fight.
But the rules that were set up allowed 3 board members to say, you know, if nobody will let us put something on the agenda, 3 of us can have the power under state law to call a special meeting. Well, that's a bit of a hassle to the majority. Make a whole extra meeting so we can talk about what we simply wanted to add to the original agenda. So guess what? That hasn't been a problem. We had to make a couple of threats to call special meetings, and I think we did call one, and that was probably on the sale of Central. And we haven't had any trouble. Now, if I find myself in a 2-person majority, I may not be able to get things on the agenda just to talk about them again. So I'm looking forward to maintaining at least 3 of us and maybe having another friend or ally or something along those lines join me when this election is over with in November.
I'm going to make a correction here. I said September 15th. The primary is September 12th, so
12th.
that you have proper information there. Sorry about that error. Well, okay, going back to the agenda setting.
Yeah.
So in Rice Lake, when it was a township, and I actually went to one of them. I actually was on the Normanna Township Board at the time, but they had an agenda-setting session, and the public was welcome to come. Mm-hmm. And maybe they had something that they would address the board at that time, and they might consider putting that on as an agenda item. I believe that happens in the county. And I'm not sure about the city council because I don't attend those meetings, but do you see any reason why that couldn't be a possibility for the public to set in on those agenda setting sessions and find out what is going to be coming up?
You know, if the public trusts its public servants, its elected officials, you probably don't have to go through all those sorts of hoops. And I could imagine a situation in which if we were being transparent and we weren't trying to do things behind the public's back, that the public would allow us they would trust that we would, weren't trying to hide things from them. I guess I'd have to say that based upon my experiences recently, I'd have no objection to having a much more open agenda setting session. When I was briefly chairman of the board almost 17 years ago, I invited other board members who were kept out of them to come. We had it set up so you'd have to have no more than 4 people there. We had a 9-member board, and 4 people was not a quorum. So I encouraged other people to come so that they didn't have to be worried that things were being done behind their back. And most of them didn't want to come, but I was only the chairman for 4 years, or for 4 months, so I only had 4 occasions to do that. But we've abandoned that process, and as I said, when Art and I were the only 2 people on it, and when Gary Glass was all by himself, mm-hmm. He had absolutely no control of the agenda setting. So,
no voice, not even, we can set aside control, but he did not have a voice even in that. There's a big difference there. But, okay, one of the things that has happened, and I hear it all the time, even from people who don't live within our district, distrust is a major problem in this district. Wouldn't this be a good way to try and rebuild the trust to the voters?
But, it's going to take a lot more than that. I mean,
it's just one. That's just one idea.
It's one of a great many things. Publicizing the meetings, being honest. And that's one thing about my notion about what an office holder should do. An awful lot of office holders withhold information that's going to maybe discourage people from voting for them. I believe you should lay things out on the table. And I think the willingness to raise taxes is on every voter's mind. And I want everybody to know that if I am elected, I may not be in a majority, but I am prepared, depending on what the political and financial landscape is, I am prepared to raise some taxes. But to the best of my ability, I want the public to know that I want them to understand that, and not think that I'm somehow going to try try to sneak these taxes up so they don't find out about it when they get their assessment from the county government. I think everybody who runs for public office should stand for something and not hide the skeletons in the closet. And so that's what people might have to face. It doesn't mean that I'll have a majority that will go along with me. In fact, some of my allies on the school board have already let me know they're not so keen on the idea of boosting taxes. So I may be a lone voice for that.
Well, you know, you don't have to always agree on every single thing.
No.
And I've learned that along the ways. But I can see your point, so I don't hold that against you as I felt before, simply because we can't allow that investment to deteriorate. I mean,
that's a hard
that
argument.
is exactly why we got into the mess we did before. But of course, there was a whole lot of lying going on about how bad those schools were, which is another issue we can take up some other time. However, you know, what we have in front of us now is we've got a major problem. We've had mismanagement, we've had poor administration, we've had so many things wrong with this district, and I won't sweep it under the rug and just say kumbaya, where everybody's going to get along to go along, because it's not. That's not reality. And unless we face reality and make the changes, we are affecting these students, and that is the key reason for the school district and educating our kids. That is our future. That is our future, and we need to do everything in our power to make sure they have the best education they can get, and all the fumbling and fooling around and the deception and accusations are not in the best interest of this entire community, and it's time it was stopped.
Well, I cannot argue with that. By the way, what's our time? How much time do we have left? We have about an hour or so.
Well,
because there are other directions that I would take us.
Oh, yes, you got a few more minutes.
I got a few more minutes?
Sure.
How about equity? You raised the subject of East and West. And I have to say that probably the I'm not sure if it's the first or the second worst, because, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the fact that we we blew a financial hole in the district budget, or we don't have the teachers necessary to educate our kids? You know, which of those is worse? They're both chained together and thrown in the water, and they'll both sink together. We have a growing minority population, and because the United States is a nation in which I think there's more inequity than there's ever been, there are a lot of kids who could use that teacher contact time that aren't getting it.
Yes.
And the results have not been pretty. Now, the most recent testing evaluations of the district show that there's an incremental increase overall, but the gap is still getting bigger between those kids who come from pretty well-to-do backgrounds and those kids who are struggling because they come from tough home environments. That is also become an East-West problem between a lot of the Western schools and the Eastern schools. And one of the things that I find most damnable is that one of the funds that we get from the state, called compensatory education, which is based on free and reduced lunch,
yes,
is skewed into the well-to-do schools of the East and diverted away from the schools out West, which generate that compensatory education money. Now, we're not breaking any rules, although a few years ago we were. But apparently we are meeting the state's guidelines, and we're allowed some room to move things around. But that we are doing that in a district that is not doing justice by some of these poor kids, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. It's not only inequitable, it's embarrassing.
Art had described that on a previous program, and I'm curious to find out. And like I stopped, filming in the early part of the year. I think it was late winter. Has it gotten worse again than this year, as far as those monies go? With it, there's still.
We had we had a group of dedicated Denfeld parents organize themselves and come and talk to us.
I was at that meeting, yeah.
And I must say that we gave them a lot of wonderful words, but not really an awful lot of substantive financial help. And as I said, I don't think we're meeting the spirit of the law. If we do that, it will cause a little bit of pain in the eastern end of town as well.
They can stand a little bit of discomfort,
well,
don't you think?
You know, I've already said the red plan has led us to take $11 million essentially out of our budget, or many, many millions of dollars out of our budget. So the eastern schools are not as well off as they ought to be or would have been if we'd had a much more modest building plan and we hadn't decided to fund it all from the classroom instead of taxes. But I believe in honoring the spirit of the law, and that is a huge embarrassment, that gap between minority and non-minority kids. And it's something we need to do something about.
And I understand we're the worst in the state of Minnesota.
Well, I don't know if we're the worst, but it's hard to imagine anybody much worse than we have been.
That's the information I was given, and so whether we're the worst or close to the worst, it doesn't matter. It's still those students that are suffering, and it's time that was stopped as well. And you have another issue that you would like to address as well? Or you can't pick which one you. I'm trying to mentally evaluate or run through what I wrote to the Duluth News Tribune. By the way, I am. I tell people that I give them my information. I do have a blog, LincolnDemocrat.com. They're free to visit it, just as they'll be free to visit YouTube and watch this interview that you've offered under the PAC TV. I want people to come and visit it. I also have a campaign website, weltyforschoolboard.com, and I've never hidden how I feel about what goes on, and I believe in telling people what I see as a school board member. Parents, when they send their kids off to junior high school, they ask their kids what happened in school. They're not like little kindergartners. It's, we cut out puppy dogs today and we put up penguins on the window. No, they disappear into these brick buildings and they don't tell you anything about what they did because they don't want you to know. I try to do everything I can to give parents and other people all the information that I see from the inside position on the school board, and whether my analysis is good or off kilter or not, I leave up to other people. But I try to get people to take a look at information so that they can be as informed as I am. And we talked about the finances. We've talked about the inequity. We've kind of nibbled around the question about whether the administration is one that we can trust or not. And I have got to tell you, I do think the superintendent has a good sense for what we ought to do with children. Although he also told me early on that he viewed his job as protecting the schools from the school board. If that's his job, he may not have done all that great a job those first 2 years I was on the board. And I also have to say, I love some of the administrators that have joined the administration in the 3 years and a half that I've served on the board. There are some wonderful people. Amy Starzecki, our assistant superintendent, fantastic person, and Mike Carey, Dr. Mike Carey, a wonderful curriculum director who has once again found his curriculum department gutted because of the current financial difficulties. Oh my goodness.
You asked whether or not we were going to be going into deficit. I don't think we will go into deficit, but we're making cuts, and I do not envy Dr. Carey. We had a couple of schools that fell afoul of the state Board of Education, and Dr. Carey has done yeoman's work trying to make sure that we are keeping our curriculum up to date And so we've got some wonderful people in position, but I now have to worry that not only are the classrooms too crowded, but the administrators who are trying to enforce all these laws the state and the federal government give us don't burn out because they don't have the manpower or the human power to do what we are obligated to do, or else it's curtains for us and somebody comes down and gives us heck.
Doesn't sound it doesn't sound pleasant. But excuse me, for the superintendent, when I talk about administration, I'm speaking only of the superintendent. I know some of those other people that have replaced many of the retirees. They are very fine people. But for the superintendent to say that it's his job to, how did you state that again?
Basically, he told me that he felt it was his job to protect the schools from the school board.
Well, the school board is the
it's the
voice of the people. And
let's say that again.
It is the voice of the people. So, okay, if the voice of the people is being silenced, told how to act, told how not to act, told what to do, what not to do, I think there is a need for a school board to be elected that is not going to take that from the superintendent, because those school board members are his boss. He is not the boss over them.
He is our only employee.
Yeah, she. Yeah, they are not to be micromanaged by the board, but the board makes the decisions that affect the way he operates the district, and he needs to keep that in mind in his position that he is in.
And I would say this, I think the superintendent's viewpoint, although I did not have a happy first couple of years, I think his viewpoint is this: majority rules.
Oh, we know that.
Which, if you were in the minority, didn't afford you a lot of protection. And it's a difficult job. It's a political job.
Oh, it is.
They want to do education, but you've got people who are the voice of the people out there with different points of view about things. But if you start taking sides over and above just simply the majority rule, you could be in the soup. And I think the superintendent was young when he got started, and I think he's witnessed the difficulties that arise when you have unhappy school board members that are kept in the minority, and their concerns are not addressed, and the information they want is not provided them. And Art's not the only person that can be a little ornery at times.
Well, I think if I were in that position, I'd be ornery a lot, because I was very ornery over my increase in taxes, only to have every single one of the promises unfulfilled. And they're not going to be fulfilled in the future unless we make some major changes. That's just the only way to get this problem, this can of worms, cleaned out and straightened up. That's just my opinion on that. But I appreciate the fact that, Harry, you're willing to try one more time. And we have a decision to make, and it's in your hands. You are the voters, and you need to make clear-cut decisions on September 12th, so you have a choice come the November election. And so appreciate your coming in here today, Harry.
My pleasure.
Giving your opinion. And like I said, we're not always in agreement, but that's okay. We can still get along and learn to understand one another. So thanks very much for coming in.
I've enjoyed it.
Glad to have you. Thanks for viewing. Bye now.